Okay, good morning. Let's get started. We're glad to have the Darren with us this morning. Darren have with first grade for 40 years. How many?
30 plus.
30 plus. Okay, impressive. Glad you're here, Gina. I'm glad you're back. Okay, let me go through church-wide announcements, and then we'll turn this over to Darren. He's got a whole book to do, so this is going to be exciting. It's a short one. Preparing for worship on page 2 from Jordan, with 2 N's on that. She's there on that one. You'll see, well, Bill Turnberg's on the chancel today. All right, you're playing organ the whole time. Yes, that's right. Okay, so look on page 9. You'll see about the choir coming from Plymouth. You know where Ariel. I have to think. I think of antenna the first thing, and then I have to go to Ariel. So, I had to make a change on that. So, okay, so there he is on that one. Let's get organized. Meets on October 15th. You'll see it on page 10. Lunch and Learn on October 15th, also on page 10. And today, at 12:30 to 2 at Arapahoe United Methodist Church, there's understanding the proposed constitutional amendments. You'll see that on page 10 also. Free exercise classes on page 11, and judges needed for PEP business competition, Puerto Rico trip planned, and contemplative worship is going to happen on November 9th. So I know Patty and Travis are going to go to that. Laura's going to go to that. Okay, a bunch of them. Okay. So I won't see you guys until 2 seconds before Sunday school starts. So I'll know not to get worried. Heather is on the panel at SMU. You'll see on page 12. And Wednesday Night Live, you'll see on 13. That was good. Timothy taught on Esther. And I'll tell you, at Broadway in the narthex, there's a painting of Esther preparing to meet the king, and it's a beautiful oil painting that's there. But Timothy did a great job on it. This Esther is the book that Brad Sham reads at Temple Emmanuel once a year, and it's like he's reading a play. Every time Haman is named, boo, you know, when you know some of the other guys they cheer for it. It's really an amazing time. Leanne Hampton is our Ian Wilson this week. So glad that Leanne's do that, and we've got several coming as well. And let's see what else here. Open house. Okay, this is open house at Gaston Avenue. You'll see that on the back page on page 16. Anything else church-wide announcements that we need to announce? If not, Darren, it's all yours. We'll be back at 10:40.
Oh, sure.
I'm going to pass the prayer book around.
You bet. You bet.
Turn.
Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm excited to get to be in Foundations again, so it's always fun to get to come through here. And today we get to talk about what is probably my favorite book in the Bible. I love the book of Ecclesiastes. I like the books that are sort of the ones that you don't really know what to do with all the time, right? Like Ecclesiastes is one of my favorite books. The book of Judges, which is the darkest book in the Bible. Really weird stuff goes on there. I think that's a great one. Anything that really kind of that forces us to, I don't know, maybe reevaluate or rethink the way what we think we know about stuff. And Ecclesiastes does a really, really good job of doing that for us. In fact, when I was in seminary, I think it was towards the end of my run, I had Phil some credit hour or something like that, and took an entire semester's class on Ecclesiastes and just fell in love with the book. So happy to get to talk about it today. So last week, if I'm not mistaken, y'all looked at Proverbs, correct?
Right.
Did y'all? Okay, good.
Yes.
Good. I hope that's right, because that's sort of what we're going to start with. I think it's important to understand Ecclesiastes properly. You got to kind of put it in context of the rest of what's going on around it, right? So we've got this section, the wisdom literature in the Bible, and particularly Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, and then the book of Job really are asking these really deep questions about what does it mean to live well in the world? How do we do that, right? What leads towards flourishing? What leads towards life? What leads towards meaning? And all three of those books sort of approach it from different angles and perspectives. So what I want us to start with is we're going to do a little point-counterpoint with some Proverbs and some of Ecclesiastes. So I pulled just some different passages, and I want to read them, and then I want us to kind of just discuss what we notice about What's different, what's similar, maybe the tone is a little bit different. All right, so this first one, this is a passage from Proverbs. My son, don't forget my instruction. Let your heart guard my commands, because they will help you live a long time and provide you with well-being. Don't let loyalty and faithfulness leave you. Bind them on your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will find favor and approval in the eyes of God and humanity. So that's Proverbs. Ecclesiastes. Perfectly pointless, says the teacher. Perfectly pointless. Everything is pointless. What do people gain from all their hard work that they do so hard under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains as it always has. The sun rises, the sun sets, it returns to the place where it dawns. The wind blows to the north and it blows around to the south. It goes around and around and around again. Okay? Again, this is Proverbs. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't rely on your own intelligence. Know him in all your paths, and he will keep your ways straight. Don't consider yourself wise. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Then your body will be healthy and your bones will be strengthened. Now, Ecclesiastes. All streams flow to the sea, but the sea is never full. To the place where the rivers flow, they will continue to flow. All words are tiring. No one is able to speak. The eye isn't satisfied with seeing, neither is the ear filled up by hearing. Whatever has happened, that will happen again. Whatever has occurred, that will occur again. All right, let's do one more just for grins. Let's see, this is a good one. Let's try this one. Proverbs. The Lord laid the foundation of the earth with wisdom, establishing the heavens with understanding. With his knowledge, the watery depths burst open, and the skies dropped dew. Ecclesiastes. But when I set my mind to understand wisdom, and also to understand madness and folly, I realized that this too was just wind chasing. Remember, in much wisdom is much aggravation. The more knowledge, the more pain. All right. We can keep going, but I think we're starting to get the sense here. What are you hearing that is the difference between Proverbs, which we looked at last week, and Ecclesiastes, which we're going to dive into this week? What did you notice?
Somebody needs an antidepressant.
All
It's all negative.
Okay. All right. What else did you hear?
There's hope in one area, and Ecclesiastes, what you've read so far,
Yeah.
feels like I should just take a dive out the window.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all futile, it's pointless.
Yeah. Right. Ecclesiastes does not seem to be setting us up for a joyful trip through the book, right? Or
There's a certain amount of
Is it?
truth in it.
Well,
there's a certain amount of truth in it, right? Yeah. There's a sense where when we hear Ecclesiastes, we're like, well, that sounds like kind of a downer, but yeah, I kind of identify to some of that, right? Whereas the Proverbs, sometimes we listen to that and we're like, that sounds awesome. I don't know that I've ever really felt that, right? So we've got this tension that exists between the writer of Proverbs, who is giving us their understanding of the way to a good life, or the way to prosper, the way to find understanding and meaning and purpose, all these types of things. Do these things, and it really comes across as like not a how-to manual necessarily, but if you will do these things, then there will be a natural result that is generally going to be good, or favorable, or enjoyable. And then you get to Ecclesiastes, and the vibe feels just different, right? Right off the bat, it seems as if their experience of life seems to be different from what the writer of Proverbs told us. So then the question you're left with, which is why I think it's important to hold both of these books together, is who's right? Right? Or what do we do with the fact that they seem to have different approaches to what's going on, right? I mean, this is the Bible we're talking about. The Bible is supposed to be the place we turn to be able to get our understanding and our answers. And, if we're having trouble in life, we open the Bible and point to a spot and we can get the answer. Well, we all know that that's not really the way the Bible works. The Bible instead gives you two books that are very right next to each other, Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, that are trying to sort of get at the same thing. What does it mean to find purpose in life? How do you find meaning? How do you live life well? And they seem to be coming at it from either very different places or different understandings of what makes sense, right? So what is the Bible trying to tell us that we have these two different understandings? So we'll kind of put that over here for a second. We'll come back and figure out how we maybe help them speak to each other a little bit better.
Well, you know, if we
Yeah,
just go
please.
to, if we just go to Ecclesiastes 3,
Uh-huh.
I think of that as positive.
Me too.
So
Cleo,
that's
let's go ahead
weird.
and jump there.
Yeah, well, okay.
All right.
I assume you're talking about the very first part of it, right?
Yes,
For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down, a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance, a time to throw away stones, a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek, a time to lose, a time to keep, a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time for love and a time for hate, a time for war and a time for peace.
Turn.
Right?
Jangle the guitar.
Yeah, Roger McGuinn and the boys and the Birds got together and said, we're going to take this and make this a song of hope. They're in a time of tumultuous political strife, everything in the 60s. They said, we're going to look and turn to this and say, here's how we can find it. And that sounds pretty great. But right before it, what did
Except for every good thing, in every line, there
Yeah.
is something very oppressive
Yeah.
that you do not want.
right?
but
Right.
it's kind of, it's common sense. I mean, that's a lie,
Yeah,
sort
It's,
of, you know?
and
It kind of bridges the gap between
yeah.
those.
It sort of says that thing that we don't like to admit, but that we know is true, right? Like, or that we sometimes feel like if things are good or happen to us, we're always kind of like, oof, we're waiting for the next shoe to drop, right? Or what bad might be coming. Whereas, you know, when we do read Proverbs, it does feel a little bit more like everything is kind of sunny and bright. And we're like, yeah, okay, maybe, but Ecclesiastes sort of
Maybe
brings
I
us back
just-
down a little bit, right?
Maybe I just read the first line and didn't read the second, you know, like.
Yeah, no.
The time to plant, and then I didn't read the second part, you know.
Mhm.
So maybe that's all.
But then even within that, if you keep going, we stopped at verse 8, you keep going to verse 9, and you have, what gain have the workers from their toil? I have seen the busyness that God has given to everyone to be busy with. He has made everything suitable for its time. Moreover, he has put a sense of past and future into their minds, yet they cannot find out what God has done from beginning to end. Right? So even coming off of this part, that we want to kind of make it the positive thing, right? The whole, as we read through Ecclesiastes, we're wanting it to make us feel good. We're wanting us to find this clue to what does it mean to live life well, and we want it to be good news, right? And so we keep trying to find it, and then when he says there's times everything's appointed, but you're never really going to understand it, it's sort of what he comes back with, right? From what we observe in the natural world, there seems to be a time and a place for everything. Things grow, things die. There's good times, there's bad times. Seas come, seas go. Rivers flow, rivers dry up, all these kind of things. And we look at it and we say there seems to be order. But then when we get right down to it, what he tells us is, but you're never going to know really what it is. You're never going to understand fully. You're not going to be able to answer that big question of why. Well, but why does it work this way? And that's whenever he comes back and says, there's certain things we won't know. All right? So who is this that's talking to us, right? So we begin at the very beginning. It's important to understand in the book of Ecclesiastes, there's actually two different people that are talking to us. And we hear from one of them a lot more than the other. But it starts in verse 1, it says, the words of the teacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. So this is a little introduction. So this introduction is being given to us by someone, by this narrator, this author, who's kind of put the book together. And we don't hear from him again until the very, very end of the book. So what we've got is, there's this unnamed, anonymous author that starts by saying, you're about to hear the words from the teacher, Kohelet. We'll talk about him in a second. And then for the rest of the book, we hear from the teacher. And then at the end, the author comes back and kind of puts his epilogue on it. So we'll get there in a second. But it's important to understand you've got this author that's compiled the stuff at the beginning and the end, and in the middle is this teacher, this Kohelet. So who is this teacher? Well, we don't know that either. He's identified as the words of the teacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. So people have spent all kinds of time trying to figure out, is this a literal son of David? Maybe it's Solomon. Solomon's supposed to be, the wisest person around. Whenever he asked God for wisdom and God granted him that. So we're like, oh, maybe when they say king, son of David, this is Solomon. Or maybe it's one of his other sons. Or maybe it's just sort of, probably more the case, just a, sort of a thing they said to kind of give themselves validity. Not a literal son of David, but just sort of in the lineage of, in the house of, in the vibe, if you will, of David. So probably not given to us as a clear identifier, but it is this teacher. Kohelet is the name that's sort of given to him, which just means wise one or teacher, or one who is speaking to a gathered group, right? So I guess arguably I could be Kohelet at this moment, right? So it's someone who is sounding forth on things that other people are going to listen to and try to gain knowledge from. And then the teacher takes off. And right at the very beginning, it starts with this fun line. Vanity of vanities, says the teacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Now that word that gets used there is tricky. In the Hebrew, the word is hevel, H-E-V-E-L. And it's really, really, really tricky to find an exact English translation of that word. So we've struggled for years trying to figure out what it is. Sometimes we come vanity of vanities. The one I read earlier said pointless. Meaningless is one that gets used a lot. Meaningless, all is meaningless. Are there any other ones that you've run across for that, the way we try to define, translate that word? The reason why it's hard to get an actual translation for it is because the word means like vapor or smoke or mist or something we can't quite grab, right? So we translate it meaningless, and if we say that, it all of a sudden puts us in a certain direction. Like if I say meaningless, all is meaningless, what does that immediately do to your attitude moving toward the rest of the book? Yeah, you're like, well then why do this, right? Or pointless, all of life is pointless. And so when we read it that way, everybody kind of said, this sounds really depressing, right? And it does sort of set us off on that tone. And if we're not careful, we read the rest of the book with this sense of, well, this is just going to be a downer, right? Vanity maybe changes it a little bit, but still we've got negative kind of connotations attached to it. Like rarely is vanity lifted up as a positive attribute, right? Like that person's vain or vanity is worthless. Point. We get back into that hamster wheel trying to figure out what does this word mean. And really it's this idea of, like I said, smoke or vapor. So hevel, all is hevel. All is fleeting. All is sort of, so what is the thing about smoke, right? Like smoke is this thing that, you ever try to grab smoke, right? Like if you've ever been at a campfire, right? This big waft of smoke is coming towards you. It looks like you try to push it away. What happens when you put your hands through it? It's still coming, man. It dissipates, but it's still kind of all around you, right? Or fog, it looks like this, if you've ever been driving on a really foggy day, you accidentally turn your high beams on, and it looks like you got a wall right in front of you. You're like, ah! But then you just drive right through it, right? So it's this idea of, it looks like this thing you could grab hold of, but when you try to grab hold of it, it floats away, right? And so that is really more the place where the teacher wants us to start from, is this idea that everything that we think is around us, it looks like it's going to make sense, so that I'm going to try to lay out for you. When we try to really understand it, it sort of just floats away from us. So it's more like enigma or paradox or all this kind of stuff. So if we start from that understanding, rather than sort of an initially negative, pointless, but more of a neutral, I think, smoke, vapor, I think maybe it'll help us a little bit as we go. So y'all had this great summary of the book that I know was attached to the email that hopefully maybe you look through a little bit, but it really lays out the outline and the order of the book. Great, like it tells you everything that the guy's going to talk about. So rather than reading what you've maybe already read, we'll talk more about how this applies, right? So what happens is, we said the author introduces the teacher, and the teacher has this opening little poem. Vanity of vanity, says the teacher, all is vanity. What do people gain from all their toil, which they toil under the sun? A generation comes and a generation goes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises, the sun goes down, it hurries to the place. The wind blows. We read this part a little earlier, right? So it's this idea that all the cycles of nature seem to just kind of be happening. So he opens up the book with sort of talking about just the march of time. Like, the things that we observe around us is that the sun rises and then the sun's going to set. The tide's going to come in, the tide's going to go back out. And there is this, all these things just kind of keep happening over and over again. And it's all things that are beyond our control, right? We can't control the tide, we can't control the wind, we can't control, all these things. And so there's this sense of the way that the world operates, it just kind of keeps happening over and over and over again. So he starts with this kind of idea about the march of time, and then he's going to end the book with a really cheery section about death, which is basically going to tell you that, guess what? You're all going to die. Everybody's going to die. So he gets to, like, in 11 and 12, he talks about, you can gain all the wisdom in the world, you're going to die. You can be foolish your entire life, you're going to die. You can be very, very rich, you're going to die. You can be very, very poor, you're going to die. It's this sort of reminder. It's not trying to be a downer, but he's just trying to be realistic, right? Like, death, undefeated, at least at this point in the story, right? So whatever you have thought about your experience on earth, it's going to end at some point, right? So he begins with this idea that the march of time, time is undefeated. Time just keeps going. Time turns around and around and around, and eventually all of us are going to die, right? So if we start with that understanding, then he fills in the rest of the book with all the things that we do to kind of fill our time. Does that make sense? Time is going to move on. Eventually you're going to die. So what do you do while you're here? That's what he wants us to kind of play around with. And so, like, okay, now you're going to give us the good news. Here's how I effectively fill my time between point A and point B, which are both inevitabilities. And you're going to now tell me how to meaningfully fill my time. But the problem is, he's already started by telling you what?
All things are wearisome.
All things are wearisome, or meaningless, or vanity, or devil, right? So you're like, well, golly, buddy, give me something. So for chapters, the rest of 1 all the way through to 12, he goes through all these different ways that we try to find meaning in our life. You want to find meaning in your job or in your employment, great. But eventually, you're going to end up at the end of the story where you're going to die. You're going to find status and wealth and importance, all these different kinds of things that we strive after. And what he keeps coming back to over and over again is, yeah, those things, you can do that, but eventually it's going to wear out, or it's going to run thin, or you're going to lose your wealth, or something's going to happen, or you're going to eventually die anyway. Or you're not. And then, just to add to it, he tells us at the beginning, and then you're probably not going to be remembered, right? Like, everybody, you can think all these great things about yourself. Eventually, somebody's going to forget about you, right? And so, does it make sense to spend your entire life trying to build up your name, your reputation, your importance, if 100 years from now nobody's going to remember that you even were walking around? Because why? It's hevel. It's all this kind of stuff. So it's not that living life is necessarily pointless, but it's the things we fill our lives with, I think, is maybe the distinction to make, right? Like, you may think that the secret to life, the secret to living well, is to have a great job and provide for your family and do all these things and have a great reputation. But in the end, it's not going to make a difference, is kind of what he says, because it will end up being hevel. And so then you're like, well, if that's the case, then maybe we just party all the time, right? So if working hard and being responsible and trying to build up a reputation and all that kind of stuff and wealth and these things, if that's not the point, then maybe we should just say, forget all of it, and we'll just go party and live life and be crazy. And he looks at it again, he says, you can do that. That's an option. But guess what? That's pointless too. That's meaningless. That's hevel. Because eventually you're going to run out of that. And so what he's trying to do for us is spend the entire bulk of the book by saying there's all these things we do to fill the time between here and here. And all of the ways that we do it ultimately don't amount to anything, right? So where's the silver lining, right? For a second there, I thought you were going to tell us it was going to end up being happy, right? So let's go back and consider how this lines up with Proverbs, right? Because Proverbs, whoever wrote that, has been telling us that it seems like there is more of A plus B equals C, right? If you live your life well, honor your parents, do all the right stuff, and then life's going to work out well for you. That's sort of that's an oversimplification, but it's sort of the basic point of Proverbs, right? The idea that Proverbs is playing around with is there's this idea of God's wisdom that is woven through the creation. The Hebrew word is chokmah, that there is this thread, if you want to think of it that way, that runs through everything. And if you are linked into that movement of God, of wisdom in the world, if you find yourself attached to that, you will have, flourishing and success, and things will go well for you, and things will work out great. That's sort of that's the promise of Proverbs. What Ecclesiastes does is it comes along and says, yeah, but I've seen really, really good people have really, really terrible stuff happen to them. So what do you do with that, Mr. Proverbs? Or, I've seen really, really terrible people have all kinds of success and live a great life and things seem really well for them. What do you do about that? If, as you say, Proverbs, if you do these things, life will work out well, there's just too many examples that the teacher's going to come along and say, yeah, but I've seen this happen. So what do you do? So what we end up having is Ecclesiastes sort of operates as like a critique of accepted wisdom, right? If here's the accepted wisdom of the day, is kind of what Proverbs is. And then Ecclesiastes comes back and says, yeah, that all sounds good, but what about when these things happen? And you're sort of stuck again with this tension of, well, what do I do? So I'll ask that question of you. What do you think about, how do you respond, right? If Proverbs told us last week, if we do these things, then good things are going to happen. And then the teacher comes along and says, yeah, but what about all these other things? So when we look at our questions here, right? So like some of the, what challenges you about the text? What threatens you or unsettles you from the text? What do we do with Ecclesiastes then? If Proverbs told us life is like this, and then Ecclesiastes comes and has kind of a, yeah, but what do you do with this? What do you do?
One thought that came to mind, and I'd never thought about it, according to what we're talking about, but all of a sudden, Paul jumps out at me.
Okay.
And he says, this is my version of what he says. He says, I've been rich and I've been poor, but I've been happy at all my levels. In other words, he's been shipwrecked, he's been tried to be murdered. He's done all this stuff. Some of it good, some of it bad, but he's basically happy in that he has found the one thing here again. Both of these, they're telling us that's going to disappear someday, but he's found the one thing that we as Christians anyway, hope is not going to disappear.
Yeah.
All the other stuff could be good, bad, and indifferent, but that one outcome is enough to be happy at, regardless of our situation.
Yeah, so if we take that idea kind of and sort of figure out how does that weave into here, what the writer is telling us is there's a multitude of things you can try to fill your life with to find meaning, but ultimately they're going to fall short. So what Don has introduced now, what if we can find the one thing that isn't fleeting or hevel or whatever else, right? So maybe there's something we can kind of actually grab onto or hook onto. Somebody else, what are your thoughts?
I probably wouldn't read much of it except chapter 3, the
Okay.
first part.
Yeah.
The rest of it's just, it might be true, but it's bleak.
Okay. Yeah, it does get bleak, right? So like I said, please, hello.
It's like he's leveling the playing field.
Okay.
Like, it might seem bleak, but it's kind of like, you guys over here think you have everything, it's nothing. You guys over here think you have nothing.
Yeah.
It's the same as them.
Right.
It's still an odd, it's the glasses half empty approach.
Yeah.
But in a way, it's saying you're all in the same boat
Mm-hmm,
eventually.
yeah,
So what are you gonna do about it?
yeah. It's sort of, I mean, it's this, again, it's a bit of an oversimplification, but Proverbs sort of gives you the way we wish the world would be, or the way that we would love for the world to be. If I do good things are going to happen. If I do bad things are going to happen. We can put our head around that, right? Here's, Proverbs is presenting, this is the way we want things to be, and Ecclesiastes comes and says, but here's the way it seems to really be. So how do we find a way to make these things not be at odds, but maybe that they can complement each other, or at least sort of be moving in the same direction a little bit. And so the reason why I think it's important to not think that at the beginning, when we go back to that word hevel, right, that all of our English translations sort of do us a disservice at the beginning because it puts us in a space of, again, meaningless pointlessness. And really it's more of like enigma, or just we can't quite grasp what's going on. And so at the end of it, what the writer is trying to tell us is, so how do you live then in the midst of all this stuff? Because if you're looking to try to find meaning in all these things we're going after, you're going to end up being frustrated. But what he does say is, as he's getting towards the end in chapter 9, verse 13, he starts, and he says, I have also seen this example of wisdom under the sun. So now he's kind of speaking specifically about, the conventional ideas of the way the world should work. And it seemed great to me. There was a little city with few people in it. A great king came against it and besieged it, building great siege works around it. Now there was found in it a poor wise man, and he, by his wisdom, delivered the city. Yet no one remembered that poor man. So I said, wisdom is better than might, yet the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heeded. The quiet words of the wise are more to be heeded than the shouting of a ruler among fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one burglar is much good. So again, he's still sort of getting to this negative vibe, but what he basically says, where the teacher ends up, is, after he winds all this stuff out, says the march of time goes on, and eventually we're all going to die, and all the ways that we try to find meaning in life ultimately will leave us frustrated. But we got to land somewhere. And so where he lands is, basically, but wisdom and the pursuit of the ways of the wisdom and the fear of the Lord is the best shot you got. So you may as well lean into that, right? So what he's saying is, we won't necessarily understand everything, but this is, to kind of where Don was getting with us, is you got to land somewhere. So of the options that are presented, wisdom and fear of the Lord is probably your best bet, provided that you are not going to be fooled into thinking, if I do this, then everything is going to work out well. Because that's the trap of sort of the conventional wisdom. If I do these things, then everything's going to work well. And Ecclesiastes, the writer says, don't be fooled by that. It's still better to lean into wisdom and fear of the Lord, but don't think that because of that, everything's going to work out well. And so therefore, that's when he gets into all this stuff about, the eat, drink, and be merry part, right? Like, don't run yourself crazy trying to figure out why good things are happening or bad things are happening, because we're never going to understand it. So instead, when the bad things happen, don't let it completely bum you out and think you've done something wrong. It's just sort of the way it is. Conversely, when the good things do happen, don't assume it's because you did anything to deserve it, but instead, see it as a gift from God and enjoy the heck out of it when it comes along, right? So this idea that some people want to look at Ecclesiastes and think it's this hedonistic kind of thing of like, well, everything is meaningless, so instead just eat, drink, and be merry and just woo. That's not really what he's saying. What he's saying is you're never going to fully understand why the things are happening to you. So when the bad things happen, don't get completely, don't think you've done something wrong. And when the good things happen, don't think you necessarily deserve it or that they're going to last forever. Instead, enjoy it. Enjoy a good meal with friends. Enjoy the sunshine on your face. Enjoy a great day. Enjoy all these things because they are a gift from God. And as soon as you think you've figured out why you got it, what's going to happen? It's going to float away. And then you're going to drive yourself crazy going, oh, how do I get that back again? Oh, I know how I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it by doing this, 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 and this. And he's like, you forgot what I already said. You can't get that by doing all these things. It's going to come along and it's going to go. So enjoy it when it's there. And you look at that and go, well, okay. makes me feel a little bit better, I guess. It's not quite as much of a bummer. It's still not the formula that maybe we want, that Proverbs is trying to give us, of do these things and these things will be the result of it. But it's more, I think, realistic, right? Or it's a better way to try to maneuver through. So like I said, at the beginning, there's two voices that we hear from, right? There's this, the introduction is given to us by the author, who only has one verse, and then it's the words of the teacher, and then at the very end, the author sort of comes back and has this little epilogue. So chapter 12, at the very end, the writer is going to sort of tell you what he thinks. Lost my place. Here we go. So in 12, 13, and 14, the very end of the book, we've had this entire thing go on that the writer is telling us. And so we'll start in verse 9. So if you go, well, let's go back to 8 real quick, sorry. 8 ends the same way it starts. Vanity of vanity, says the teacher, all is vanity. So verse 1, 1, 1 or 1, 2, and 12, 8 are basically the same. So he frames his entire argument with Hevel, Hevel, all is Hevel. First thing he says, last thing he says. Then the author comes back in. Besides being wise, the teacher also taught people knowledge, weighing and studying and arranging many proverbs. The teacher sought to find pleasing words. He wrote words of truth plainly. The sayings of the wise are like goads, and like nails firmly fixed or collected sayings that are given by one shepherd. Of anything beyond these, my child, beware. Of making many books there is no end, and much study is wearisome on the flesh. So again, the author is now saying, be careful how much weight we put into all these things, because all the accumulated knowledge is still not necessarily going to give us the answers. The end of the matter. I love that. That's the way verse 13 starts. The end of the matter. Here it is. All has been heard. Fear God, keep his commandments, for that is the whole duty of everyone. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. So this is what the author tells us. He basically hears all of the teacher's arguments. You've heard it all. And basically what it comes down to is he says, this is the point. Fear God, keep God's commandments. This is the whole duty of humans. For God will bring every deed into judgment, every hidden thing, whether good or evil. So why do you think that the author ends at that spot? What do we do with, what's our take home then?
I've always taken hope that Ecclesiastes is telling me, look, there's nothing I can do. I'm going to have good, I'm going to have bad. It's life. And personally, I jump forward to the Gospels and realize that, but in the end, if I trust in the Lord, it will work out.
Yes.
I may not see it today, but in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, so it actually, the book ends with this note of hope, right? This idea that we spent all this time talking about how we can't really understand what's going on. And the best thing we can do is to live our lives according to the precepts of God, to the way that we think God has laid things out, because we think that's probably the best way to do it. And ultimately, in the end, God is going to judge, and God is going to set things right. And basically it comes down to, we're going to let God be God, and we're going to be not God, right? And the advice that the author gives is fear God, obey the commandments, and trust and hope that in the end God will set things right. Now you can look at that as either, you can decide whether you like that as the end point, but that's where the author of Ecclesiastes ends.
It's short-sighted, though, to consider that last verse as foreshadowing the Christ, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. We got to make sure we don't superimpose
The Christ back here.
Right. Yeah, which is always, so there's always this, that's a good point, there's always this sort of balance, right, that exists particularly when we're dealing with Old Testament scriptures, as New Testament folk, as Christians, we do, our lens that we read all the Bible through is through Jesus. But we got to make sure we don't superimpose it too much to where we read this and go, but one day Jesus is going to make everything okay. That's not, that's taken a little bit too far, but it's this idea that the Hebrew idea that God is still going to ultimately judge and make things right. whatever that looks like, right? But that's not really up to us. That's sort of God's role to be God. And the best we can do to try to make through is to trust and believe that God's ways are the right ways. And even though we may not fully understand why things happen here, which is sort of the way it is, right? Like, I haven't been able to figure it out yet. But what I have been able to figure out is how do I order my life in a way that kind of gets me through the best I can, right? Yeah, please.
Yeah, you know, Solomon, and I think maybe he authored this Ecclesiastes book, I don't know whether he did or not,
Right.
but he basically did everything you could possibly do in one lifetime and then some.
Mm-hmm.
But he was the smartest person that ever lived. He did a lot of good learning, then he kind of switched the switch and did a whole lot of crazy bad things, trying to still learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, well, boy, he really changed, and all of a sudden, he's not this great guy. All those brains aren't doing him much good. But then he comes back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think here he's summing up. He's just saying, I've done it all. I've done the good, I've done the bad. And here's the conclusion I had finally come to. And
Right.
I came back to where I started,
Mm-hmm.
that believing in God's way is the way to do it.
Yeah.
And then the New Testament basically says that same thing.
Yeah. So
So God basically made it all right
Yeah.
through the death and resurrection of Christ.
Right. Yeah.
Not through what we do, other than we have to believe.
Mm-hmm. Please.
Real quick, interesting how it was put together here. We have Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and then Song of Solomon. I would have thought they would have put Ecclesiastes right after Job,
Yeah.
two negative things, and then jump into Psalms and Proverbs.
Right. Yeah. But so they're all sort of informing each other, right? So like if we only had Ecclesiastes, it doesn't make as much sense because it's what is this guy reacting to? Well, he's reacting to sort of the conventional understanding of wisdom, which is sort of what's played out in Proverbs, right? Because and if you only had Proverbs, then all those questions that the writer is bold enough to ask out loud, it's all the things we don't like to talk about, right? It's all the things that we feel like we're not allowed to say that at church or something like that. Or we're not allowed to have these big questions. Well, why do bad things happen to good people? Or why does good things happen to bad people? All these kind of things, right? If all we had was Proverbs to go with, then we're left struggling. Ecclesiastes asks the questions out loud that we're already all wondering, or that we're already all struggling with, right? And ultimately, what the author, not the teacher, but the author comes down to is, here's this, it's competing things, right? Do this and everything's gonna make sense, or maybe it's not. So the best we can do, fear God and trust the commandments and believe in this hope that God is gonna make all things right. Not because we think we're gonna then have it all figured out. It's not about figuring it out. That's sort of the point. When I talk to people who aren't people of faith, and they ask me why do the whole Christianity, why do the thing of faith? And my response to that is rarely, well, because I think I'm right and you're wrong. Because that's horribly offensive to say to somebody. But B, I don't know for sure. Like the reason why I live a life of faith is because I've looked at all the options and I've come to the conclusion that this is the way that I can make sense out of how to navigate through the world, right? I'm never going to fully understand everything, but I'm going to choose to live my life in you got to have some rails somewhere, right? And so living the life of faith, following the way of Jesus, trying to live my life the best way I can to emulate what he did is the best way that I can make sense of how to navigate through the world that always seems to be crazy and pointless and hevel, right? It's the rudder that I can hold on to, not because I know I'm right, but because it's the best way that I can get through this crazy thing of life. And I think that's what Ecclesiastes is trying to help us figure out. So.
Thank you, Darren.
Thanks, Darren.
I've always wondered if this would have been the memoir of Solomon.
Yeah, looking back on it.
Okay, Jim, I think you've got the prayer book right there. Let's go through our list here, and then we'll go down. Okay. All right, we have safe travels for David Slatton. He went to Lubbock. He wanted to see his Texas Tech Red Raiders, and so safe travels for him on the way back. Dale Cohen is with her husband, Randy, in Atlanta. We'll go ahead. Prayers for Carlita Huff on the death of RG. We sent the card last week. I doubt if RG saw it, but I know Carlita did. So that was it for that. Bill Jumberg reminded the service is October 25th at 2 p.m. in the sanctuary. So put that on your calendars. Dale also asked for prayer for her friend Wendy Solomon, who's a timely name there, I guess. Who has been ill for 8 weeks with bronchial tube inflammation, and the doctors haven't figured out why, and she's asking for prayer for the doctors to sort that out so that she can get some relief. Are there other prayers? Thank you. Are there other prayer requests that we have for today? If not, let's pray, and then we'll go downstairs. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for a time that we can study Ecclesiastes, which may not be the turn-to scriptures that we go to, but sometimes the reality is there. Father, we pray for safe travels for David Slatton as he returns from Lubbock, for Dale Cohen and her husband Randy as they return from Atlanta. We pray for the family of R.G. Huff, especially Carlita, upon his death. And we'll pray for Dale's friend, Wendy Solomon, who's having the bronchial tube inflammation. Help the doctors to find out what's wrong and for her to stay strong and to continue to have a good spirit. Father, we thank you for our pastor, for our staff, and our church. Help us be your hands and feet in this part of the world. And we pray. Amen.
Amen. See y'all downstairs.
I will, you too. Gina, it's so nice to see you.
Why are you asking me?
Okay. I do know that.